daycare calls. And I know I need to get down there. My wife's out of the area. I need to get my son. And I am using and, smoking meth, trying to get out of this room. And for 3 hours, I'm trying to get out of this room, and I can't.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Kazazza, the author of Training with the CL. I now say author because you can go and read some of the chapters on Substack. I am very slowly releasing them. Today's guest is a former Navy SEAL, therapist, paramedic, firefighter, and the CEO of Bishop and Dice Defense LLC. He's nationally recognized for his groundbreaking TACOPS to PSYOPS approach, blending tactical training with mental health strategies to empower veterans, first responders, and law enforcement. His journey has been anything but linear, clearly. From overseas deployment to decorative service, from running into fires to running from addiction. He lived the razor's edge of chaos and control. His breaking point came in the grip of meth addiction when he nearly lost the chance to save his own son during a public health crisis. That reckoning became the foundation for his transformation. Today, he uses his holistic change model to help others heal the invisible wounds of service and addiction, work he shares in his memoir, After the Trident. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Tony Dice. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Jana, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And what a crazy introduction.
What a crazy life you had.
I know. You make it sound like, wow, when there was so much chaos and under the hood, there was so much going on. I was projecting this pillar of strength, discipline, and competence, and inside I was a freaking mess, So I hope to carry a message that if you feel that way too, you're not alone. There's a lot to be said for high performers out there who are struggling.
Let's start there then. You just went there. So let's start there because you just said something super powerful that I feel like people can relate to when they watch people on social media. And you see somebody and they look super happy or they're like a happy couple. And then you find out they're divorced or they're being cheated on or whatever. And they paint this picture and yet inside there's all this chaos going on. Right. And, you just mentioned, I had this disciplined and all this other stuff, but there was all this chaos. So how do you manage that chaos? What was going on? How was it portrayed versus what you were going on internally? And how did you, manage it? How did you manage that chaos?
Well, there's two terms that pop into my head right off the bat that we need to kind of throw out there. And one is a functional alcoholic, and then there's a high functioning alcoholic. And I think that there's people who rock the world out there who are high functioning alcoholics or high functioning addicts. And they are out there moving and shaking and changing the world and they're getting shit done at a very high level. Those people, when everything's firing and everything's hitting, there's nothing you could tell them to change their ways because they're just hitting all the marks. They're out there changing the world. I felt like I was in that space for quite some time in my life, but under the hood, as with everything, things start to make crazy sounds. The check engine light comes on and all this stuff starts happening. And they want to maintain this crazy change the world pace. And that's when I'm trying to meet these marks and it's getting more and more unbalanced inside and things are beginning to wobble and shake and coming off the rails. And the problem in that lies is that if all your training in your whole life has always been never quit, never give up, no matter what, that's a crazy mix of I'm going to push through this and it's coming down, crashing and burning. You hope in situations like that you survive your bottom, because as we're not an immortal being. We're a finite structure with a finite lifespan, and you can only maintain those high RPMs for so long. So I'm hoping that to come on a podcast like this and have a platform to get the voice out, that people are out there changing the world at a very high level. And you look at throughout history, everyone who's done amazing things, there's telltale signs that there was probably some unbalance in either their family life, their social life. There's a bit of almost like obsessive compulsive mania involved with those world changers that if you're one of those people out there who are high functioning, but inside you have this little warning that it's not okay, those are the little voices that eventually you got to start listening to.
How do you you said so much great things, but I'm curious in terms of how do you then, if you're one of those people listening, it's like, I'm a high functioning addict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you confront that to make a change, or do you make a change, or how do you approach something like that?
Okay. Well, I've been working for over a decade with law enforcement, first responders, veterans, high performers, and groups, and all of them have to hit some kind of bottom, and bottoms look different for everyone. You have an emotional bottom, you have a physical bottom, you have a financial bottom, you have a spiritual bottom. All these bottoms. Some bottoms are very visible, some are invisible. There has to be something in their world that they hit, they feel, that impacts them in a way where they question, do I want to continue this life this way? There needs to be a perspective shift takes place where I want to try living differently, and it's not like it's the fine tuning. It's something, and this has been the pattern I've observed. I'm sure there's outliers out there, but the pattern I've observed is there needs to be some kind of reckoning that takes place. And it could be you have so many legs on your table. You have the family leg, you might have the spiritual leg, you have the work leg, and usually it's the work leg that's going to be, you're going to hold on to the hardest because that's providing income and, prestige and all that. A lot of the identity is tied up in your work leg, but the family leg usually takes the brunt early on. So there's usually cracks and stressors there early on. That one begins to wobble, and there could very easily have a spouse or someone in your life or a kid says something to you that hits home in such a way that you don't want to continue down this path. And that might be enough, or that might be enough that if you hear someone else go, well, their family started crumbling, they can see the pattern in others, they might realize. And it's, some people are able to learn from others quickly. Other people have to go out and experience it themselves. I was one who was like, I'm going to experience it myself. I'm going to wait till all the legs go and then I'll realize. But yes, so it can be a stopping point for any one of those legs, could be a reckoning. And, it's sometimes the emotional ones come out of nowhere, or that's the one it's the darkest. And in our whole lives, we've been trained not to show that side of us. And when they talk about, at 3 a.m. when the demons come, that's that emotional coming to grips with, I am empty inside. I have lost this passion that I used to carry.
You said before this one, in the last answer to the question, you mentioned something about when you grow up in the never quit, like when you develop that, you never want to quit, you want to go, 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 go. Was that a type of childhood that you had? Or how does one develop something where, or would you say it's more family? Would you say it's society? Where's the pressure of, let's not quit, and that mentality that you have in order for you to then, for everything to then crumble, if that essentially is what I'm saying?
So let's see. Good question. Was I born this way? My mom will say I was a stubborn, adventurous child, and I had very strong will. I do know my parents were amazing in the fact that they gave us rope swings and tree houses. And we grew up in the mountains of Northern California where we had way out, small town, population 89. And, it was wonderful. We were all homeschooled. It was wonderful until I became a teenager. When you're homeschooled and the oldest of 8 brothers and sisters, not so wonderful. there was like one girl within 100 miles and she didn't like me, who wasn't related to me. But that never quit. I think that I had a dogged competitiveness about me. I always pushed myself super hard. And then, after becoming a paramedic and a firefighter, there was this sense of, if you're going to be a Navy SEAL, you've got to have this mindset. And I was showing up at the Buds. I came from a very rural place, and I wasn't even the big fish in my little pond, but I showed up at Buds, and there's this whole, 180 candidates, and every one of them looked freaking badass. And every one of them had this look in them that they're going to die before they quit. And you're realizing that most 90% of people are going to quit in the next couple of weeks, what's about to happen and how do I think I'm different than that? And so there was this little switch inside me that goes, I just need to go. I just need to go. That's been something, little voice I could hear. And that served me so well then. But years later in addiction, it almost killed me.
I want to get there, but I want to talk about buds real quick and what you just said. You talked about like how everybody had that no quit look, right? They all looked badass, right? And I feel like a lot of us, when we like walk into something, whatever you mentioned earlier too, our career, it's so tied to our identity, right? And when you show up at a job, you know, like a law office, you know, people are dressed a certain way, right? When you show up at a police job, people are dressed a certain way. It's all tied to your identity, right? So was there a point when you showed up at Buds where any negative thoughts of, I don't know if I'm good enough, anything, and how did you, and when did you realize like, I'm going to make it? And when did that shift happen for you in terms of, or how did you combat those negative, I don't know if I'm going to make it, everyone seems better than me, things like that?
There's two parts of that. One, let me paint the picture of that situation in a little more detail. Yeah. There were some people in that Buds group who forwent going to the Olympics that year because they wanted to be here. They were that level of a swimmer. You know, there were people there that, I mean, they looked like they came out of a triathlon magazine or off a bodybuilder magazine, and they had cool personalities. They were already looking the part. They knew how to wear the shades just right. So there was definitely a sense of, I am outclassed here. I am nowhere near the weight I am now. I was like I was a very young boy who showed up.
And how old were you, by the way, when you first
I was actually old going in. I was 24 years old, so I was the old man there. But I was smaller in stature. I believe I weighed like 175 pounds back then, and I weigh 220 today.
Did that mess a little bit with your mind too? It's like I'm the oldest one, as opposed, and like, you know, the way you look compared to other people. Like, how did that? Talk about what was going on.
Yeah, I knew I was the oldest one, so I mean, it's weird. You know, the difference between a 20-year-old or 18-year-old and a 24-year-old. You may think there's not a lot of difference, but there's definitely some wear and tear issues going on. I also had the feeling of not being, you know, as socially cool as these guys, but I did love some things. I did love the way the military used alcohol for everything. You know, it's our emotional currency. You know, you indoctrinate, you celebrate, you elevate, you separate. Everything you do is alcohol related. If you two have a problem, get you guys need to go get a drink and sort this out. You know, if someone loses a teammate, hey man, I got a bottle, we're gonna get through this. It is the Swiss Army knife of emotions. I love that, and so I'd carry a flask around, and if I wanted to instantly get in with someone, and here you go. Throughout training, I would bury little airplane bottles of like tequila and stuff all over the place. Hey, come here, man. Can I dig out a little hole and pull out some bottles? So it was an instant currency for me to fit in and break the ice. So I had that going for me. There was this other piece though, and I'm going to give credit to my mom for this. Ever since I was little, she was always told me I was special, like many moms do, and that you could do anything, just start it. You know, that was her thing she would told me. You know, I remember, you know, there on the back of the bathroom door, when you sit down to do your business and you close the bathroom door, she had a little thing handwritten. You can do anything you want, just start it. You know, and it was just this constant thing. You're special. And I believed my mom, you know, to this day. That was like, if I see someone else do something, there's zero problem with me thinking I can do it. You know, it was just like, it's humanly possible. I have a shot at it. And I think the difference was I was willing to try as many times as possible to do it. I would go out on the weekends and I would practice running that obstacle course. Behind the scenes, when no one could see me, I would do all the failed attempts so that when I'm in front of someone, I was all of a sudden, whoa, he's a natural, you know, and that was my, that was my natural way to, like, you know, to get ahead. So I had that thought, and that the fact that somebody could do it, I would say by hook or by crook, I am going to figure this out, even if I have to fall to the cracks. You know, I'm going to find a way to wiggle my way and somehow get through it. And I think the part here that's different for me than someone else is that my whole life I've been really good at falling through the cracks. I got a job and I was working on it. I could see, like, oh, look at that. They're not doing inventory on the popcorn. I can eat as much popcorn as I want. You know, I would instantly see little things that I could get through or get away with I was not the guy with the highest morals or the highest standards. I would take advantage of situations in a heartbeat, but it was almost like I got really good at seeing system flaws and I would use them to my advantage. So I figured in my head, hey, I'm going to figure out this SEAL thing. And I'm going to get through this program.
That is interesting. That's really, I like that mindset too. I like the fact that and I want to start saying that to my nephew. Like, you can do anything, just start. Because I mean, the thing is that we all start at zero, right? We all start somewhere.
Right.
And that's the hardest part, right? Is starting.
Start and then the follow up is stumble forward.
Stumble forward.
Just
Yeah.
stumble forward. Get back up. You're 6 feet ahead. You're 6 feet further than you fell. So get back up and just keep repeating.
That. At what point did you know that you were going to make it? Was there ever a point where you didn't think that you were going to make it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in fact, my first BUD/S class was 212, and I did not make it through. And a little bit of backstory on that, I had injured a shoulder before coming into the SEAL teams, and it was one that happened that I thought I could recover from, but it would pop in a socket. And so I tried to hide it from the Navy, that whole kind of thing. So not only am I going into BUD/S against all these rock stars, I'm going knowing I'm already damaged, but I'm like, I'm going to still make it. I'm going to still make it. And so going into training, I'm going, and it's just brutal. Sockets come out of socket. I'm still trying to hide it, And then going through Hell Week, the first time I took a fall and I landed on my other shoulder and popped out my other shoulder. And so now I'm like trying to hide 2 shoulder dislocations. I had to have another SEAL stand on my chest, another BUD/S candidate, and pop myself shoulder back in and continued on for maybe 45 minutes further, rolled out of class 212, had to have a whole shoulder operation, bone chips removed. They call it an open bank heart. And the doctor who worked on me,
like churning right now.
The doctor who operated on me, he's doing my checkup, and I'm like, all right, how am I looking, doc? He's like, well, it's long. I said, well, I got to class back up. I got to go back into training. He kind of laughed. He goes, no one with this operation has ever made it through training. In fact, our goal for you in your rehab is to get you to a point where you can put your shirt on by yourself. And I was like, are you kidding me? What? I got angry. I said, no. And sure enough, from point of injury, 9 months later, I classed back up again in the class 219. I made it through that BUD/S trip. After I graduated in San Diego, the island of Coronado, there's a big bridge that connects San Diego to the Coronado Bay Bridge. I climbed out on the bottom of it all the way mid-span. So you're right in the middle underneath the bridge, and did a set of pull-ups hanging under there, took a picture of me hanging underneath and sent that picture to my surgeon. I said, don't you effing ever tell anyone they can't do anything. I was so angry about you.
I have to talk about that right now because when I was 21, when I lost all hearing in my left ear, I went completely deaf, and they told me I would never get my hearing back, right? Mm-hmm. And I looked at them and I was like, miracles happen every day. Like where it's gonna happen. Now, It took 10 years for me to regain not all of my hearing, but a good amount of my hearing. It was actually funny because yesterday, one of my earbuds on my good ear, it went out, so I only had my left one, and I was listening to my book at 2 times speed in my left ear, which 20 years or whatever it was, 15 years ago, it would never have happened, right?
Whoa.
And I want to know for yourself, how did you keep that? And I think the hardest part for me is that the so-called experts are telling me I'll never regain hearing. It's not possible. This doesn't happen, right? So how did you, for that time, because 9 months doesn't seem like a long time, but and that time, I'm sure it felt like forever. And I'm sure with your recovery, you had some setbacks, right? And how did you keep the eye on where you wanted to go? And how did you, I guess in a way, because I feel like a lot of people that are listening to this can understand, like, we hear the experts and we don't want to believe them sometimes, but we can't help it. There's this human part of us that goes, maybe they're right? They're the experts, right? So how did you not listen, and how did you get to where you are?
There were some things that I instantly had distrust for them, because if he's telling me I'm not going to make it, and his objective, his goal was to put my T-shirt on by myself, well then whatever the plan they have is not the one I'm going to use. And so I went down and I said, I went not to that surgeon, but I went down to another doctor I kind of trusted. And I said, hey, if I was a quarterback with $1 million arm, what would they do with me? What would be the protocol? If there was a bunch of money on the line and you need to get me back in the game. And they said, there you go down to the Balboa Medical Center. And they have this crazy system down there and the Sportsplex. And so I went down there and I talked to some physical therapy guys. And they had this massive machine where you strap in your whole body and then you strap your arm into it. And the arm is like completely, the machine has it. And the machine will go zzz, 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 and maneuver it for you. It feels like it could rip your arm off you if it wanted to. You allow this machine to give you your full range of motion back slowly by itself. And I would go down there and they would let me use it. And so I'm using this protocol that was, that was saved it was just one that they would use for a quarterback on $1 million game.
Was it so painful?
It was horribly painful. Yeah. And it was just, it was aggressive. I was excited about that. And to me, I think it would be a nightmare for someone who is a physical therapist because I'm going to let you pull on my arm until it comes out of socket. I trust you know bodies enough that you're not going to, but I'm not going to let you stop because I want to get there no matter what. The pain, let me know when it hurts. I said, well, it hurts all the way. So I'm just yeah. So I just have to find a doctor I trust and let him go with it. And it was hard. I think that the things I listened to, that there's the physical therapist at that sports complex said, hey, don't start in the gym yet. Don't start pushing on, lifting weights. Let that go. Stay really with the range of motion, with the cardio bands, really focus on getting the tendon strength before the muscle strength. And I listened to that. That made sense to me. I didn't get back in the gym. That's always been my litmus test if I'm getting healthy was to get in the gym again. And I forego that. And I listened to an expert I trusted. And I think that was the defining difference. I did not trust the first doctor's expert because his goals weren't aligned with mine. But this guy's goals were aligned with mine and said, all right, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to trust you.
That's powerful. Find somebody that's goals aligned with you and go in that. I like that. I like that a lot. Like I said, that bio, there's so much I have to ask you, and I could stay on this, but being that we're going into the second half of the show, I want to ask this to get this out of the way because I don't know if there's going to be a lot, but I do not want to forget this part. We have to talk about when, you talked about how you faked your own death. That just right there, that one line, I'm like, I need to know this story. And I need to know, was it survival? Was it escape? Was it a symbolic rebirth? And what did that teach you about control and surrender?
Gotcha. All right. So let me set the stage a little bit because
please take your own death.
And
go.
It wasn't anything as noble as you said. Just going out there, you mentioned I wrote a memoirs and it's a story of my life because we can only change perspective by sharing stories. You can't, facts won't do it. A story will. This is not a story, shoot 'em up, bang, bang, hero story of a Navy SEAL. This is like a Navy SEAL who under the hood was not a good person. I was down this downward trajectory. My standards were dropping faster than, my morals. And it was just it wasn't pretty. And
what age are we at, just to paint the picture?
We're in, 24, 25, 26, probably late 20s, early 30s. I've gotten out of the SEAL teams. I got out pre 9/11 because there was no war going on. It was a boring time to be a SEAL. And I had an alcohol addiction going. I was beginning a party, had the party drugs going. I got out and that was escalating. And when you escalate with coke and ecstasy, it's very expensive and starts costing a lot. You make poorer and poorer financial choices. Running out of money tends to happen. My physicality is declining. My bank account's getting empty. I'm behind payments on my little convertible I had. And I'm hitting a financial bottom. And I'm doing a whole lot of coke back then. Yeah, they call it stinking thinking, where you're just making poor decision after poor decision. And these ideas pop in your head. If they make enough sense, and I have enough track record in my life that I can survive anything. I had this idea. I'm way behind payments on the car. Not a lot of money in the bank. If I could just take my convertible and swerve it under a semi, all my problems will be over. It will just, it'll look like he fell asleep and all my problems will be over. And it seems like the perfect plan, but I got to make it look real. So I got to be on the phone talking to someone while I'm doing it. So they have a record of me, a witness to the accident, and it has to happen in a certain stretch of highway, and so I had this all planned out, and, I made sure there's no drugs or alcohol in my system because I didn't want anything to show up. So now I'm stone cold sober with this plan, still going, all right, it's a good plan. Cruising down the highway, and here comes the giant semi cruising by, and da-da-da-da-da-da, talking on the phone, 3, 2, 1, execute, under the back wheel of the semi comes over the top. I get knocked out, thrown into the side. Ambulance comes. I found out later from the ambulance driver that I was all bloodied and combative and fought with them. I had no record of that. Ended up going through like a whole year of like medical bills and CTs and anti-seizure medication. It was horrible. And these big semi owners and manufacturers are used to this kind of craziness, and they have a legal team involved, and they just guns up. Didn't get anything out. I lost a year of my life of just like being, oh man, it was not pretty. It was me. Like, it didn't compute that I would die in a convertible. But it made like, all right, this is a way. I'm behind payments on this car. Screw this car anyway, and at least all my problems are over. Yeah, and that's where we go. Like, we go to. It's not like, what can I change to better my situation? It's like drastic times call from drastic measures. Let's go. And that's what it took. It took me just like that. That was the thinking. And that's the way I solved all my problems. I'm going to hit you as hard and as fast and from a direction you don't expect. And that's how we're going to get through this.
What was going through your mind at that? Was there a point where you were like, I don't think I could do this?
On that
you're
one,
like, no, I'm committed. You're like, I'm ready.
I think my whole life I've been pretty good at just, once I say I'm going to execute something, I can feel the little butterflies ahead of time. Yeah. And then the timeline comes, and then, pull the trigger. It's just so different though, because you said something that I don't want the audience to look over, is that you were sober at the time compared to, and that's a different mindset in terms of where you mentioned earlier is like you were doing a lot of drugs, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you have this sober mindset. I mean, that's two totally different mindsets where like, that's what I got to jump in and say and put this, but people don't realize it. When you're an alcoholic or addict, and you stop using drugs or alcohol and you get them all out of your system, or you're not instantly thinking clearly, you're not instantly making good decisions, that lingers with you for 6 months, 9 months. Your brain is not wired the same, and your decision making is askew. I like to describe it this way. When we're born with or you're raised with a sense of right and wrong, and you do right and you do wrong, the difference. When you drink and you have fun partying, you can do a little bit left and a little bit right of what's right and wrong. And that's what's fun about it. It's like, outside the boundaries, it's fun. When you progressively drink an addiction, it does this and this and this and this. And then pretty soon, eventually, you're acting exactly opposition of what is right and wrong. It's gotten so askew, and you want to do the next wrong thing. I mean, you instinctively want to not do the right thing. In fact, it feels shitty doing the right thing. It takes a long time to realign what you're doing and wanting to do the right thing and not wanting to do the wrong thing. I mean, so it takes a while to realign that gut. That gut instinct for me was to go that way when that's clearly the right decision. Let's actually talk about how we ended up in this situation in terms of when did the drugs start and when did it all of a sudden get to I'm an addict, like I'm doing this all the time. When did that happen for you? Like a bottom. When was my bottom? When was the realization? Yeah. And it was, and I'm just going to capture this quickly. The last pandemic we had, the H1N1, the swine flu. So not the big one, the little one we had, the precursor pandemic. It was during that. I was high on crystal meth on a 3-day bender. I've been up for 3 days. The phone rings. It's the daycare where my son was at. I let it go to voicemail because you never answer the phone when you're that spun up. And the daycare says, there's been an exposure to daycare. They're having everyone come pick up their children. You need to come pick up your son. So I was like, oh, my son's in trouble. Then my wife calls and it goes to voicemail, and the daycare calls. And I know I need to get down there. My wife's out of the area. I need to get my son. And I am using and, smoking meth, trying to get out of this room. And for 3 hours, I'm trying to get out of this room, And I can't. I'm just tears coming down my eyes, trying to put this down, just fighting like this battle of, I need my son. My whole life I've been trained to be a hero, paramedic, Navy SEAL, and I can't. And I remember turning off my phone, pushing it under the bed, and just using. That's when I realized that this was my new master. It was the most important thing in my life. And that's when I stopped looking in the mirror. That's when the hate came. And that's when I knew I was an addict.
Wow. So talk us through. I was going to get there, but you beat me. So talk about that situation. Then after that, when was that rock bottom where you made a turning point to make that change, and how challenging was that? I mean, that's a really, really hard, getting over addiction and all that, and making a change is difficult.
Yeah. That wasn't the bottom where I stopped using. That was when I used, like, before I was going in this downward trajectory. This was just like, I'm going straight down. I'm just using as hard as I can. And fellow alcoholics will relate to this. You're at a point where, like, you have, a third of the bottle left. You shouldn't drink it, and you just say F it, and you don't care what happens. It's that level where you don't care if you wake up. You're just going. And that continued for a while. And the turning point for me was finally, I remember I was 3:00 in the morning on this crazy house, this total dive, this little place I shouldn't be. And there were 2 kids there. They were like 12 years old, jeans, no shirts, playing with these airsoft guns, horrible weapons handling skills. They're just, I don't know why they were up this late. And I was getting ready to pass out, and I was awoken by one of the kids aiming one of the airsoft guns at me, saying, hey, freak. When I rolled over and looked at him, his face, I looked past the gun into his face, and there was this young boy, 11, 12 years old, but he had like shark eyes. Like there's no innocence in this kid anymore. He's seen too much. He had lost innocence. He's been exposed to too much too soon. And I realized, it clicked in my head that this is going to happen to my son. My dad died of this. I'm going to die of this. And this is going to be his path too. And that's what made me get up that day. So our generation's version of the internet back then was the phone book. I pulled out the yellow pages and I just looked for treatment centers, and I put my finger down on one and randomly picked one, and I went there. Showed up 9 hours late. That was my first day sober, last day using. It was July 29th, 2010. And that treatment center there, somehow, some way, it was a timing thing of I was in the space where I wanted it, and there was a treatment available, and it was this nexus of being there. And that therapist, his name is Dre Summers, somehow he connected with me. I don't know. He somehow connected with me, and I wanted it. I wanted it so bad. And I will say there was this extra piece, like 6 days in, my insurance said, okay, we're going to transfer you out of treatment. You're good enough. And I was going to lose my mind. I was like, what? Yeah, I was so angry. People were coming trying to calm me down. I was screaming. I was so angry. And they said, well, if you have $9,000, you can stay. And I'm like, what? Who has money in rehab? You don't come here with a bunch of money. Oh my God, I was so angry. And they had me calling people asking for loans, and no one would give me a loan. And then I had one idea. I said, I still have my car. Can you give me a pass, a 4-hour pass? And he gave me a pass, and I went down to CarMax and I sold my car. And I had this check that was enough to cover treatment. And for a second in the parking lot, I looked at the check and I go, I don't have to go back. This for fucking a tweaker. This is a good run. This is good. And I was like, but part of me wanted, I hated the guy I'd become. Part of me wanted it so bad. I went back with that check. I didn't even go to the bank. I went with just the check back to the treatment center, and I signed the back of the check and said, can you accept this as payment? And they took it as payment. Everything was writing on this. I had slid all my poker chips middle of the table saying, if I don't get this, I'm screwed. And that was the beginning of me going all in. I committed. I'm all in on this. If you tell me to do a handstand, I'm going to do a handstand. There was one part in that treatment. This therapist, this crazy therapist said, when you were a little boy, you never learned how to self-soothe. And I was like, what do you mean? And they said, what I want you to do is I want you to go down to the Walmart and buy yourself a teddy bear. And for the rest of your time in treatment, I want you to carry that teddy bear with you 24/7. And I looked at her and I go, but I'm a Navy SEAL. We don't do that kind of thing. They said, well, do you want to get sober? And I was like, okay. I went down to Walmart. I bought this black teddy bear. I put a little skull and crossbone armband on it to make it look tough. And I carried around for like 2.5 weeks, this teddy bear, 24 hours a day. I was walking around with this teddy bear in treatment because somehow they told me I'd stay sober, and I would do anything to stay sober.
Wow. I mean, the thing is, you wanted it, obviously.
I wanted it. I wanted
so bad.
Their goals were aligned with mine, and
Yeah.
I will do whatever you say. Yeah.
How long were you there?
32 days total in treatment, transferred to like a outpatient group for a couple more weeks, got involved in a 12-step recovery program. I was just going hard. I mean, if a sponsor said, I want you to go to at least a meeting a day, I would go to 5 meetings a day. I would do whatever. I wanted to be super sober. I'm going to be the most sober guy. And so I went full tilt into recovery.
How hard was it afterwards when you were rebuilding your life? And were there ever some moments where you almost went back?
The closest I ever came, I was 3 months in and like 90 days clean and sober. I'm doing good. Everything's going good. But it's funny when you're married and you think it's because you quit drinking and using, you're going to be happy, joyous, and free. You still argue and you feel every bit of it, and they know what buttons to push, and you'll get in it, and they'll say things like, "Why don't you need to go call your sponsor? Why don't you need a meeting?" And say stuff like, and then just make you so angry that it gets bad. And I was pushing back and yelling, and it was getting ugly. And it's the kind of ugly argument that pours out into the yard, and you're still yelling. And she gets in the car and peels out, and I'm yelling on the street after her, just making a Jerry, Springer show event out of it. It was bad. I was so angry with her, and I walk into my garage, and there's like those Lazy Susan with all the nuts and bolts in the little shelves. There was one of those, and I was so angry, I smashed it. And it flew across the room and broke open, and out pops this meth pipe. Ding, ding, ding. Totally intact, sitting there. And I could tell instantly that it had resin in it, and my eyes locked on it, and my jaw got tight. And I began to I almost shake because I knew I could screw her by screwing myself. And I was so angry. And I looked at it, and I was just like, I pushed it on the ground and smashed it and shook and called my sponsor and told them, like, oh, you don't believe what happened. I mean, I was so close to using because I was just angry. Anger is a drug for me. Just about got me.
Hey, quick pause before we dive back in. You know how we talk about building resilience, confidence, and mindset? There's a nonprofit helping kids do exactly that. Every mission starts with a story, but right now, 1 in 3 kids in America feels like they don't belong, and only 30% read at grade level. At Empower Lit, we're changing that one school at a time. Through author visits, literacy camps, team publishing programs, and Cosmo the Alien on YouTube, we help kids discover confidence through storytelling. When you give a monthly donation, you're not just donating. You're helping a child believe in themselves, their words, and their worth. Join the mission at empowerlitnonprofit.org because belief is where every great story begins. All right, now back to the episode. Let's get into it. So let's now talk about the anger. So let's go into, because I feel like a lot of people can relate to the feeling of anger. It's just a default for a lot of us, right? Especially when, I just mentioned this yesterday, when someone cuts you off, people are getting angry and stuff. I was actually with somebody and they were like screaming someone cut us off and they were like screaming at this person, like, they can't hear you. They don't care that you're angry. Why do you care? I don't understand this. Right. But the thing is that like, I used to be so angry as a young adult. And I want to know for yourself, like, how do you, and I changed it through laughter. I would just smile all the time. I would laugh all the time. And suddenly like anger just went away. And that is not my default anymore. Like just laughter is my default. So for yourself, like, how did you And maybe you still struggle, I don't know, but what are some ways that you have coped to control that anger, to not allow that anger to take over you, to not allow that anger to affect those around you?
Okay. For me, I had to recognize that anger is one of my drugs of choice. There's a thing about anger. When you get in there, it's almost like I see someone messing with my car, I'll get happy and angry at the same time because I have permission to have rage and I have a target to put it on, and it's all coming together, And so, but it's
Yeah, it feels good, right? It feels
it's
so
freedom.
good. Yeah.
It's I can act out. I can break the rules because I'm so angry. Look what you made me do. I can do whatever I want. And it's almost like it's exactly like using, and I'm going to feel the consequences afterwards. I'm going to feel regret and remorse. It's the whole using cycle. So I had to admit that anger is one of my drugs, and I cannot use it like other people do. And my antidote for anger is gratitude. Someone broke into your car. I am grateful I have a car. I have a flat tire. I have 3 other ones that aren't flat. That gratitude kicks in is my savior. And everything in my life right now, I'm so grateful for. I have this huge tattoo on my leg, and it's a handcuff key. And on the key, it says gratitude. It's the key to my freedom. It really is. If I want to shed these shackles of addiction, a grateful alcoholic will not drink.
I like the gratitude. And how long did it take you to get to that point?
I know.
I
instantly got it, and I was cured. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's the illusion of today. The illusion of today is that it's instant, right? Because we live in an instant world, thanks Amazon, where everything is like now, right? And we're so lucky to live in a country where, we have hot water and we have to be able to turn up the AC. We can control our own temperature, and we have all this stuff that makes our life comfortable and makes everything so instant. But the negative side of that is our brain chemistry gets rewired to the fact that everything needs to be done instantly. And if I can't get it right now, I'm a failure.
So some things that I did and I learned early on, and these are all part of the things I cover in my book, after the Trident, make a gratitude list. And I don't call it a gratitude list in my book. I call it an effort list. And I say list 5 to 10 things that you're freaking grateful for. You're no particular order, but just 5 to 10 things you're grateful for. Now take it, fold it up, and put it next to your credit cards, your cash, and your purse, your wallet. And the deal you make is if you're ever feeling low, you feel like you're going to drink, you feel like you're going to lose or do something stupid, before you grab that cash, because usually you're doing something wrong and involves some kind of form payment. At 3 a.m. at an ATM, it's never for something good. It's always for something bad. You're going to pull this out. And the deal you make is before you do whatever it is you're going to do, you're going to look at this list and you're going to say out loud, F my wife, F my house, F my program of recovery, F, and you're going to say it with conviction because you're saying F these things. You're saying, I'm throwing these things away. Right. They no longer are that important to me. These are things I'm agreeing to lose because you were going to lose all these things if you can get on the road. And if you're good with that transaction, proceed. Or the other thing that the clerk's going to look at you and go, get the hell out of my store, you crazy motherfucker. You need to keep in mind that these things that you're grateful for in your life are your anchor. These are the things you're in it to win it for. And those are things you can also lose if you choose, because you don't think of those when you're about to buy that little bag of white shit. You don't think of those with the 12-pack in your hand. Oh, no, this is going to be different. You need to realize that that's what's on the table.
Wow. I like that. Being that now we're at like the quarter, the final stretch, I need to talk about the TACOPS to PSYOPS approach.
Yeah,
and why I want to know why it resonates both with tactical professionals and civilians. Talk about what you created.
Okay. Well, and this is true for high performers or anyone out there who's hard to reach. Let me give you a visual example here. Inside my head, when you and I meet or anyone else, this is how I am. How are you doing? Okay. I have this defensive stance going on inside of me, and this is so freaking comfortable. I can stand like this all day long. This is normal military, law enforcement, veteran stance inside is like this. To be able to get to this person authentically, we need to move into a place that's like this, which does not feel comfortable. This feels vulnerable. This feels like I'm leaving myself open. Okay, I'm back to here again. So we got to get to here. So the TACOPS PSYOPS approach is I'll roll into a police department, a fire department, a VA, wherever these individuals hang out, and I will provide, Bishop and Dice Defense will provide tactics, training, uniform supply, all the cool guy gear. We'll talk shop, and for a whole year, we'll have fun, and we'll get to know each other, and we'll talk about the things you and I think are cool, like the new H gear, this new holster system that the team guys are using, or whatever it is. We'll get you up to speed, and in that process, we're forming a relationship. You're beginning to trust me. And on year 2, we bring in mental health services. We'll bring in the anonymous counseling. We'll bring in resources that they can then engage with because they know who we are. That's the package. That's the bait and switch. We will come in and we'll do the work to build the relationship in the second half of the program as we bring in the mental health service.
Wow. I like that. I like the whole, you're right though. We, for those that are watching this or listening to the show, not watching, it was hands up versus hands open, essentially. Right. And, we have that whole, distrust. We have that, defense. I need to protect myself, especially as we get older, that defense gets stronger because we start to distrust the world more and more, which, I think that's really, really interesting. And now how does that now correlate with your holistic change model?
And the holistic change model, what I've done is got my master's, went back to work in the field for a while, went and got my PhD. I started asking myself, what happened? How did everything in my life change? How did I get from there to here? This 12-step recovery thing, what's really going on under the hood? And so I used, a lot of the training I had, the research, I delved in, and I did my whole dissertation on what interventions work best with veterans and kind of parsed out of 12-step recovery, the embedded theory found within that program. And so I pulled it out and I said, look, if this is stages of change followed by narrative therapy, rolls into CBT, and then finishes up with existential. These are all therapeutic theories that we've been using for years all over the spectrum. But in this particular order, they seem to have a profound effect on those going through addiction. Well, why can't your therapist practice these interventions both with their patients who are going through 12-step recovery to better support them, or with someone who's maybe averse to 12-step therapy, who would like to follow a different path, who says that 12-step, those guys aren't for me. Let me try something different. It's a way to get the same output using the same format that you're seeing all these people in 12-step recovery benefit from. So there's a lot of overlap with 12-step recovery, but this is the nuts and bolts. This is the work being done. And for many, this is what validates that program. They look at it and they go, oh, I thought it was a bunch of religious stuff and they just prayed, but no. There's actually a lot of really good work being done in that program. It just took the lens of an academic to kind of parse that out.
I really like that. I want to ask you, this is, you don't have to, if you're like, I don't want to go here, but there are a lot of people that I have talked to and stuff that have didn't have great relationships with their children because a lot of the times they're gone. They're gone like 360 days out of the year, right? And then the children build resentment because the father's not around, right? And and then the father comes around and it's like, well, I don't respect you because you weren't here, right? And, and then they have those two that are addicts, right? Or those that just work all the time and they're not around. So I'm curious in terms of how do you rebuild a relationship that may have not been that wasn't so strong because of your either career choice or, your addiction or anything like that? And how is your current relationship?
What you're kind of describing is this alcoholic, drug addict, and workaholic. This is a real thing, which I think we really need to look at and diagnose more often. But all of them involve an imbalance between your family life, work life, social life that becomes unsustainable and causes chaos and unmanageability. With the kids in particular, they feel the brunt of it at an early age, and there's resentments build and all kinds of discord in the family. So as you work through a recovery program, whatever program you see, at some point in that program, there's going to be a place where you need to make amends. You got to make it right. You can't just shut the door in the past and hope they all forget, because they're not. You got to make it right. You got to change your ways. And the biggest thing with the kids is they're watching. They've been watching you their whole life. The minute you start behaving differently, they're going to observe that long before you say anything. So before you ever try to approach them and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to change, they're watching you change. They've been watching you go to meetings. They've been watching you change your behavior. You're interacting differently. You're speaking differently. So there's already this lead up. And the amends portion of many of these Republican programs is towards the end. It's 9, 10, 12 months in, where you've done a lot of behavioral change. You're acting differently. So at that point, when you come to the kids and you're going to try to make amends to them, you're already acting different and behaving different. So they're watching that process change. My amends to my kids, I had to make many of them. I have 5 kids now. They're all college age level now, and our relationship's just freaking crazy. And I can give you 2 main reasons I attribute that to. But my amends for them have been like, I gave them the genetic trait of being an addict alcoholic. That's one of my gifts I gave them, unfortunately, growing up. Besides being a shitty dad who was high on crystal meth, my amends to them is moving forward. I don't miss games. I show up at their events, whether wanted to or not. I'm going to be back there. That constant trying to show up and always be there, it became a priority in my life. 2, that conversation trumps discipline. I still have a strong household, a lot of rules and chores and all that. But every once in a while, I'll go to my kids, and this has been throughout the teenage years, and I say, you guys got 15 minutes of amnesty. If anybody here want to speak up, there's going to be no consequences for whatever we talk about. And at first they didn't believe me, but after a while, especially individually, when I give them the amnesty clause, and amnesty in the military means that if say I accidentally took home a hand grenade, they would have an amnesty box that if I brought it back and gave back my hand grenade, I wouldn't get into trouble because they'd rather have the hand grenade than me keep it. So amnesty with the kids was like, hey, 15 minutes, whatever you want to talk about, whatever. I found that they really want to tell me about their adventures. They really want to say, we climbed on top of Target last night, or we stole a bottle of wine. We stole a bottle of wine from 7-Eleven. All these little stories start coming out, and they start talking about it, knowing that there's no consequences, and they just want to, share their life. And this has been going on for years now. And I so much more value this conversation where I talk about when I did the same thing, that kind of connection has been just, that's where the heart is. That's the honesty, because I never had that as an adult. All I did is I got in serious trouble, the beatings, and all that did is make me be sneakier. I just upped my game, leveled up, and I got more sneaky, and I didn't talk to my parents. And there was this big divide going between me getting away with stuff and them trying to catch me. With my kids, it's not like they get out of everything. Like, especially if they come to me and go, can I have amnesty for something? Then I know. But that little thing of giving him permission to talk about stuff and me holding up to my end of it and not getting him in trouble,
Yeah.
no matter what they share, because they go have a crazy life too. I would be disappointed if they had a boring life,
I like the fact that too you share,
Mhm.
and you are open about, and I think that's so important too, because as you mentioned, you say, unfortunately, I gave you this trait, like I gave you
Mhm.
and that's something that I'm sure as a parent you always get weary of. It's like, I hope that I can, or my kid can come to me before it gets to a point that it ever did for me.
Oh, is amen to that, because part of my amends to them also is to be a kick-ass dad, having fun, playing, doing stuff without drugs or alcohol, giving them an example what that can look like. But they know I was a drug addict and alcoholic. They've heard the story. They need to understand there's this huge trough between where I was and where I am today. It wasn't always this fun in recovery. You have to get through the hard part. So I make sure that I've had to retell my story to them at every developmental level throughout their lives, so they have an understanding of what I've been through.
And I like the fact that you mentioned they watch you, right? And I've talked about this on the show. Kyle Shepard, who was recently on the show again, but the first time he was on the show, he talked about how his kids watch him and how that's way more powerful than me telling them things. Or, he broke a Guinness World Record, and he goes, my kids came to watch my trainings. They watched until they saw all the struggles of things, and that's way more powerful. And you don't realize that they're watching. You don't realize the impact that you have, and And that is super powerful. And final question I have to ask you is, what can we do on an everyday basis to develop our mental fitness to tackle those everyday challenges that inevitably are going to come our way?
Okay. My first gut response to that is, we'll go buy my book.
Which we have linked, by the way, in the show notes, just so you know. So everybody that is listening that's intrigued and wants to hear more about the story, right in the show notes, just click the link.
There you go. On a daily basis, there needs to be a rhythm to your life. There needs to be the sense of consistency. And I think that, we are creatures of habit. We are. We may deny it. We want to admit it, but we like those regular patterns. Even in addiction, I like to kick off at a certain time. I like, happy hours at a certain time. All of that stuff. There was a rhythm to it, even in addiction. Find that rhythm. Plant those hard points in your life. If you're in recovery and you go to a meeting and that in the morning and that sets the pace, then make that a normal thing. And if you're not in recovery, that rhythm is awesome. The morning run, the rituals, that part of that. If you can link it to your significant other, find that common language. For some reason, my wife loses her shit if I make the bed with the pillows kind of different, just slightly different. Every time she said, "Oh, the bed looks beautiful." I mean, it's whatever that button is. It pushes, it's a little extra for me, but it blows. It's the one thing that for some reason is amazing to her. Find those little rituals where it has that crossover effect. That's golden right there, And with the kids, whatever little ritual, hey, every Friday, no matter what, guys, meet me at the ice cream shop. I'm buying, and then you always show up, and then they'll begin to make it a thing. Find those rituals that everyone involves in, those crossover rituals. That is like a staple, and those are the points of gratitude in your life. When my wife's eyes get, I'm so grateful for that, And so those things, those little things, those are the magic moments.
Wow.
And the flow through for all of this. On my way through life, I was charging. I lived by the end will justify the means. The mission comes first, no matter what we finish. In recovery, in gratitude, the means will justify the end. It's the journey that's way more important. That's the part that I had to flip my script to find my way to enjoy the journey.
What? I love that. And no one has said yet in these 80 plus episodes, the ritual. And I think that is a Substack article in itself. I think that's very, very powerful. I really, really like that. And all that you said, you were an amazing guest. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Gina. It was an honor. I appreciate what you do. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. And everyone that's listening, like, share, comment, subscribe, become a Substack member for those extra goodies that only our Substack members get. See you guys all next Wednesday. Thank you.